Wonder if everyone could take their seats. We're going to start in about 30 seconds. Thank you. Oh, Jim Fruit's here. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting, special meeting of the Bloomington City Council to order. If everyone will please stand for Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Lauer,
Yes.
Alderman Sage,
Here.
Alderman Miller-Wamway,
Here.
Alderman Burgess, here. Alderman Painter, here. Alderman Schmidt, here. Alderman Black,
Here.
Alderman Howman, here. Alderman Fruin,
Here.
Mayor Renner.
Here. Thank you. And one of the things, since this is a special meeting, and it was called as of Thursday when I signed the documents, I want to start out just very briefly. Why are we here? And there have been many years we've had discussions on downtown revitalization as a critical piece of obviously moving forward with our economic development. 3 years ago when I announced as mayor, I made this a central piece in my campaign to have downtown revitalization as part of our historic core, the center of our community, and that was the main means by which we would achieve economic progress in the future. And so since I've been mayor, we've had lots of successes. Certainly we've had the downtown revitalization plan passed by the council in December of 2013. We've stabilized the bar scene. We've rewritten some of our liquor laws. We've connected the bike trail to downtown. We've had the Route 66 Visitor Center funding gap grant, and that just opened about a week and a half ago. So we've had many successes. And we discussed many possible anchors in downtown. The downtown revitalization plan calls for an anchor. And this is common, frankly, in economic revitalization and downtown development throughout the United States. Metro mayors constantly are talking about this. And so we want to be clear, though, that while we do have a short-term a problem with our budget, that should not prevent us from thinking long-term and making progress. In fact, it accentuates the need to move forward to make progress for the future. We can both balance our budget and grow the local economy for the future. And we've had now, in fact, just 4 days into our new fiscal year, and we're already planning to hit the ground running for fiscal year 2017. And next week, I'm bringing a proposal to the City Council to create a budget task force to make recommendations for very specific and precise policy and expenditure options and possibilities for the future by September 1st. So we'll be way ahead of the budget game in any recent years. So we're moving on that front. And the other point that I want to make clear, because there seems to be a fair amount of misunderstanding, our attempt here is to pursue economic and development incentives with downtown projects or other projects that the fruits of the investment, the fruits of the private investment pay for the costs. So we would have a but-for test. But for the private investment, we wouldn't be getting hotel motel revenue, right, on the particular site we'll talk about tonight. I don't think even homeless people would live in the front and center building right now. So we have a situation, we're not getting any hotel motel taxes. That money can be set aside to pay for a bond. The increased property value would be set aside. Property taxes, if it goes from a few $1 million to $35 million, there's a huge increment in new property taxes that pay for a bond. So this can be done without really upsetting our general fund situation. We can, in other words, make investments for the long term and do right by our current immediate fiscal year. So if we're creative, we can solve our current short-term problems and make progress in the long term. And so that's why we're here. That's the quick backdrop. I tried to keep it to 3 minutes. Now at this point, what I would like to do, is because we don't know the details. In fact, I don't know all the details of the project that we're about to be unveiled. Is to entertain a motion, but I believe Alderwoman Karen Schmidt was interested in making. We would put public comment to after we have heard the proposal. Okay, and if we could end that same motion, we have 10 people, so we have 15 minutes set aside. If we could suspend the rules to move public comment to after the proposal is made, and to allow all the people who have signed up to speak.
Yes, I would like to make that motion, given that the vast majority of people here need to hear the facts before they make their comments, and I think that'll be very instructive to us.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion that we move it to after 6A, and that we suspend the rules to allow everyone to have
Everyone
their
to
time
speak.
to speak.
Okay. Is there a second? Excuse me.
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Howman. And I think on this we can just do a voice vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any abstention, or excuse me, any nays? Same side? Okay, let the record show that it was unanimous. And so if we could then move, we will come to the public comment after 6A. That's before our council discussion. So we will hear you if you've signed up to speak, but before we begin our discussion ourselves, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our city manager, and I guess Mr. Gablehausen is going to come forward, and Kyle Ham, is that right?
Yes, who would like to come first? We'll have Kyle Ham. He's the, not necessarily all new, but been here a couple of months, Executive Director of the Economic Development Commission, followed by Jeff Gablehausen.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I was here about 2 weeks ago stating what the role of the EDC is in retaining and recruiting new business and new opportunity for investment, economic growth, and community sustainability. So 2 weeks later, I'm back today to talk to you about an opportunity that I think that should be looked at for consideration for the long-term sustainability of the downtown. The importance of a continued economic diversification, including both short and long-term strategies. This proposal is part of a long-term strategy for the redevelopment of the downtown. Downtowns are iconic and powerful symbols for a city and often contain the most iconic landmarks, distinctive features, and unique neighborhoods. Given that most downtowns are one of the oldest neighborhoods citywide, they offer rare insights into the city's past, present, and future. Revitalization of downtowns and central city neighborhoods can be challenging at best. They are also often the hotbeds of business creativity, neighborhood activism, nonprofit entrepreneurship, economic diversity, and the attraction of visitors, seniors, and young talent. A city's downtown area has an important and unique role in economic and social development. Downtowns create a critical mass of activities where commercial, cultural, civic activities are concentrated. This concentration facilitates business, learning, and cultural exchange. But here are a few reasons why communities need to take necessary steps to revitalize their downtown. Downtown is a symbol of communities' economic health, local quality of life, pride, and community history. These are all factors in residential, industrial, commercial, and professional recruitment. A vital downtown retains and creates jobs, which also means a stronger tax base. Long-term revitalization establishes capable businesses that use public service and provide tax revenue for the community. This lessens the burden on local government and the community taxpayers as well. Downtown is a good incubator for new businesses and the businesses block of a healthy economy. Strip centers and malls are often too expensive for new entrepreneurs. Main Street helps us to create the environment for a strong business community. A vibrant downtown area reduces sprawl by concentrating retail in one area and uses community resources wisely, such as infrastructure, tax dollars, and land. A healthy downtown core protects property values in surrounding residential neighborhoods. A traditional commercial business district is an ideal location for independent businesses, which in turn keep profits in town, supports local families with family-owned businesses, supports a local community projects such as ball teams and schools, provides a local economic foundation. A revitalized downtown provides an important civic forum where members of the community can congregate. Parades, special events, celebrations are held and reinforce an intangible sense of community. Downtown Bloomington is important both to the region and Bloomington itself, and we are not unique. Communities across America are rebuilding and enhancing their downtowns. They see the value of their historical downtowns and are rebuilding. I personally believe Bloomington has so much to offer and a great deal of untapped potential. In development, it is difficult to assemble significant land areas in downtown for meaningful redevelopment. It is impacted by a concentration of existing facilities of government. And I'll just take the cursor here and highlight the area that we're looking at that Jeff will talk about tonight. Here you have the U.S. Coliseum, and then directly catty corner is the Front and Center building and the Commerce Bank building. This is the block that we are talking about this evening, as well as the Elks building across the road, this front building, this square building right here. City-owned parking lot right here. So ultimately, almost 2 full city blocks for redevelopment. It's also congruent and sort of fluent with the History Museum right here. And when I say challenging, because as you look at the bottom here, this is all government buildings here and city parking lot. And other buildings in this loop that we create as the downtown is what we call it. Sometimes properties are hard to put together because they have numerous property owners or not economically feasible. But you also have historic components, as we do here with the museum. So this block, we believe, has the best, most likely potential for new development, and that's why this area was focused on. This area of discussion is visually challenged and it has significant impact on the psyche of downtown and the visual surroundings of the Coliseum, the Visitor Center, and government facilities. You have the opportunity to achieve not one, but almost 2 city blocks of meaningful redevelopment that is shovel-ready. There is a huge potential for economic impact in both the near term and the long term. It also preserves and probably enhances the property value of other downtown businesses. The bottom line is this is a unique opportunity for the city to be able to control its own destiny on this critical assemblage of properties in a manner which can be a significant financial gain to the community. Today, we are asking you to consider taking a closer look at the opportunity, and we ask that you direct city staff to engage the project, perform due diligence, to decide if this is a project that you want to consider for your community. Again, I will reiterate that my role and that of the EDC is to facilitate these opportunities, and with that, I'd like to introduce Jeff Gabelhausen. As an economic development professional from McLean County, it's refreshing for me to know that we're working with a developer who is local to Central Illinois. You can see his body of work not far from here, 30 miles in East Peoria, as well as College Hills here in our community. And he has been in your seats as an alderman and as a city mayor. He went to school here at ISU, and his son will start here in the fall at Illinois Wesleyan. So with that, I will give you Jeff to talk a little more detail.
Good evening. Really, thank you, Mayor, council members, staff, and community for allowing me this opportunity to be here with you this evening. As Kyle indicated, my name is Jeff Gabelhausen. I want to tell you a little bit about myself because I think it is important that you know who I am if I'm going to stand here and hopefully become involved in your community. As Kyle indicated, I was born and raised in East Peoria. My wife and I have been married for 28 years. She grew up a mile down the street. So I guess we've gotten to know each other pretty well. We're blessed with 3 wonderful children. And again, as Kyle indicated, the youngest of which will be joining Illinois Wesleyan in the fall. It's not a coincidence, though, that I stand in Bloomington tonight hoping to begin a relationship in the community, again, that my son will soon be calling home. I made a decision a few years ago when I was working with a larger development company that I wanted to go off on my own, that I wanted to work on projects closer to home, projects that perhaps were a little more meaningful to my family. I graduated from Illinois State. I then went on and got my master's from Northern Illinois University. I'm trained as a city manager, but I never wanted the job that Mr. Hales has. It's a no way to win type job, but my focus has always been on local government. I still remember something one of my Illinois State University professors said to me. He said to me that government is the government that's closest to the people, and that city government as a governmental unit has more direct impact on its citizens than any other level of government. Any other level of government, you have more impact. The decisions you make every day, you see that, you know that. I thought I understood what he meant back then, but I really learned it when I did become a member of the East Peoria City Council at age 23, and then when I became mayor for 8 years. During that time, just like you, I was involved in setting property taxes, delivering services, cutting services, trying to figure out how to balance the budget, how and whether or not to grow our economy. At the time in East Peoria, we had a kind of unique challenge. We had the highest, or one of the highest property tax rates in our city history. We had a massive budget deficit, and Caterpillar was closing 1 million square feet of manufacturing facilities. Sound familiar sometimes? I mean, it's what we were faced with. So what do? Do we grow services? We couldn't. Do we grow our economy? We didn't know how. But we did know one thing, that there was no way that we could ever raise taxes enough to be able to maintain the level of services that our community had come to expect or, quite frankly, deserve. Then it got more personal to me because I got to thinking, if we have to lay off police officers or close a fire station, what about those response times? I got a lot of family. Is one of those family members going to be the one that maybe suffers when the fire department's a little late to respond? It's that personal. Or what about the streets that we couldn't maintain well enough? Or would this just be a town that my children would say, no way, Dad, the minute I graduate, I'm out of here. So we had to change our economy. During the same time, though, that I was in my elected office, I had the opportunity to work for the local United Way. And in working with the local United Way, I learned a lot about the social service network in our community. And in a lot of ways, the strength of that social service network was dependent upon this very same local economy. Were companies able to donate? Were employees employed to be able to make contributions to those? So once again, I saw that it was our local economy that was driving the quality of life in our community. So whether it's government or social service, it became very clear to me every day. Our local economy was our responsibility, just like your local economy is your responsibility. In our case, we either had to figure out how to grow it or how to shrink it. That being said, we started to try and grow it, but we quickly learned about the competition that is out there. Not just competition, in our case, with the city across the river, or in your case, with the city next door, but cities throughout the state, cities throughout the Midwest. We're fighting for the same potential developments. We're fighting for the same attention from developers or from businesses wanting to relocate here. It's competitive. It's very, very competitive. As I moved out of my elected career, I went to work for a local development company, Cullinan Properties, and ultimately I was fortunate to become the president of Cullinan. During that time, one of the projects that I had an opportunity to kind of spend a lot of focus on was the shops at College Hills. Y'all remember the College Hills Mall? We weren't real creative in creating a new name. We had just opened the shops at Grand Prairie in Peoria. So I thought, well, if we take shops and we put it on College Hills, we could create the shops at College Hills. So that solved that problem. But we had much bigger problems in terms of how to redevelop that property. What do you do when there's 4 different property owners, each with equal say in whether or not the development can occur? How do you get Von Mauer to play nicely with Target, to play nicely with the folks that owned Hobby Lobby, and then the folks that owned the rest of the center? How do you get all those folks to work together? How do you change the reputation of a project that was known as a failure? And you're out talking to folks and you're saying, how do you want to come here? Please help us at the resurgence of this shopping center. And they're like, no, it's got too much of a negative stigma. We don't want to be part of it. Ultimately, though, that project worked, and I'd argue that it's worked pretty well, that it's created new opportunities for the community, it's created jobs, it's created definitely sales tax, and it was a partnership that made it happen. It was a partnership at the time, not just between our company and the town of Normal, but our company and the greater community, because the greater community had questions and had concerns, but they're the ones that came apart and ultimately, I think, benefit from that center. I'm not going to spend any time talking about other projects. What I want to talk about is the beginning of a process to restore and transform downtown Bloomington. Bloomington's downtown deserves to be the heart of the community. It deserves to be an economic catalyst that helps drive the local economy in a way that ultimately benefits every citizen. be the heart, and benefit others. That's what we're trying to achieve here. You see, in dealing with local government, there's a very simple truth. Either we take care of things ourselves, or if we want to call it control our own destiny, like Kyle said, or we wait for the state or federal governments to come along and help us. Well, we don't think that help's coming anytime soon. Maybe it shouldn't come. We can wait for developers to just show up at our doorsteps and say, we want to do this. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen. The developers have too many other options. They have too many other cities that are begging them to come, that are offering them shovel-ready sites that demonstrate that the welcome mat is out, saying we want you in our community. When the help doesn't come, it doesn't come from the feds, it doesn't come from the state, it doesn't come from some developer popping in, you're left with that choice now of cutting those services or raising the taxes, perhaps to a point that the people on fixed incomes can't afford. And I used to always use the analogy when my mother, after my father passed away, I used to say, I've got to do everything possible to keep property taxes from going up or to keep fees for services from going up because she was on a fixed income. And you've got a lot of people like that in your community here. So you are no different. You're no different than virtually any other community in the state. In fact, you're competing with these other cities. You know you have major near-term problems with the budget. I appreciate, Mayor, your opening comments. I think all these citizens know that. It's a question of how do you balance those major near-term problems with the need to establish a new economic base to continue to diversify the economy. That being said, almost 2 years ago, shortly after the mayor was elected, I reached out to him and I asked him if I could come over and introduce myself and see if Bloomington was a place that maybe I could do some business. At the time, for the record, my son was going to Eureka College. So I wasn't thinking of Bloomington as a place that we were going to be involved with. I was viewing it as a business opportunity. The mayor was kind enough to lead me on a walking tour of downtown and pointed out some of the assets of downtown, the strengths, the opportunities, and in some cases, the weaknesses. It became clear to me that there were a couple of areas, and Kyle's pointed them out, that have the opportunity to be transformative. And I use that word quite a bit because I do think transformative is what we have an opportunity here to be. We're not talking about the renovation of a building or one new user coming in. We're talking about something transformative. If we start the transformative process, we then line up the dominoes, and then the dominoes can start falling through other opportunities, throughout the downtown area. In that process, I began talking to other developers. Some you know, some you may not. Hopefully you'll have an opportunity to meet them in the future. And we discussed what could be possible in the downtown area and what needed to happen to get there. I had the opportunity to tour the Coliseum a few times. And I also reviewed several of your downtown studies that have been done. I talked to numerous property owners, some of whom are here tonight, about their plans and their desires. Everyone seemed hopeful and optimistic, but concerned at the same time. Concerned about whether there really could be a transformation in downtown. Not just a series of baby steps, but a transformative step. During this process, culminating late last fall, my son Cody decided that he was coming to Wesleyan. Big impact on me. Big impact. Because this stopped being a business opportunity and became more of a mission. I fully admit, I'm not the best developer around. Certainly not the biggest, certainly not the wealthiest. What I do possess is sometimes an opportunity to see a vision. Definitely possess the opportunity to surround myself with great people that are smarter than me, that are harder working than me. Definitely possess the ability to look for that transformative opportunity. Today, as Kyle mentioned, what we're talking about is basically 4 buildings. We're talking about the Front and Center building, a building located next to Front and Center, physically attached, called DUI countermeasures. And if you look real closely, this is all Front and Center here. There's a 3-story component to it and a taller portion, but it's all considered the Front and Center building. DUI countermeasures is this building right here, and then we have the Commerce Bank building and its associated drive-throughs. Those are the buildings we're talking about on that block, and then we're also talking about across the street, again, the Elks Lodge. These buildings, as you know, represent the full spectrum. Ongoing, vibrant businesses that operate daily to buildings that need a lot of help, that may probably don't have any salvage life left in them. But together they represent a meaningful amount of real estate, an amount of real estate that can be transformative in its nature. I began working with local professionals, the engineers, architects, contractors, the EDC, realtors, everybody we could talk to see if the elements could be put in place to make this area shovel-ready. And that shovel-ready term is something that you hear a lot from the state. You hear it a lot of times when they're looking at IDOT type projects. Well, if you have the engineering done and it's shovel-ready, you might get a grant. Well, here we're talking about getting a block shovel-ready so that the developers know that the welcome mat is out, that Bloomington is ready to embrace them in an open public RFP process to bring new opportunities to the town. To make this collection of property shovel-ready, we set about securing the necessary land purchase agreements and understandings. We developed options for the relocation of existing businesses while still keeping them in the downtown area. We developed our budgets for engineering, architectural, abatement, demolition, backfill, you name it. No different than going vertical. Sometimes it's harder going down. And we have all that same process. And we talked to bankers about their impressions of downtown and their willingness to be part of the solution if viable projects can come up. In full, we anticipate that this undertaking will take probably about $8.2 million. I say about because we're still not sure. We're trying to figure out, quite frankly, certain key issues still exist. How the Elks building is integrated with the building that it's touched to, and how how you backfill certain elements when you're sharing some foundation walls. But we estimate it's about $8.2 million to make this shovel ready. So our offer tonight is simply to sell you that property, to sell you shovel-ready property so that you, as a city, can go out on an RFP process, a request for proposal process. So you, as a city, can see what this universe of developers might be willing to bring you. Now, I will tell you, unless I'm excluded from the process, I'm going to have one or two proposals in. We've got our definite ideas of what we think is better. But in talking with a lot of folks in the community, I think the feeling was if this is such a transformative idea, then it shouldn't be limited to just what one developer thinks. It really should be opened up to the broader spectrum of developers. In an RFP, I would just say that special consideration obviously needs to be made to the historical nature of the property, including very much the Commerce Bank or the former People's Bank. In fact, I had an excellent opportunity today to tour the museum and meet with Greg Coos. And I think I want to be a little more blunt than just say special considerations. It's our belief, some of the folks that I've been working with, that we absolutely believe that the Commerce Bank building does not need to come down. It doesn't have to be demolished as part of this. Perhaps the drive-throughs, perhaps the addition that was built in '65, clearly an interior gutting. But we think that the exterior can be a wholesome part of a new addition. And we've seen that in so many other communities, and it's worked so well. We also think that as part of an RFP process, and if you haven't done this before, many cities have, you establish a minimum fair market value. What are you looking for in terms of what this new property should be worth in terms of its future fair market value and the taxes that can be derived from it? How do you maximize non-property tax revenues from any future development? Whether it be retail sales, whether it be hotel, motel, whatever those non-retail or non-property tax revenues might be. And ultimately, you ensure any new development is cohesively integrated into the rest of downtown as well as the greater community as a whole. Notice I didn't say limit it to a hotel. There's some great models out there for mixed-use developments. There's some great models out there for hotels with mixed use on top of them and below them. There's, if you open the door, you open the welcome mat, you might be amazed at what you can find. In closing, we know we can't look to other units of government to pay our bills. We know as local cities that we face intense competition, both locally and regionally, for development. And we know if we simply try to exist on our current revenue base, our current tax base, that in the end we're going to need more from our existing citizens, more than perhaps they can even afford to give us. So there's great examples of cities out there that have done the transformation. I would love to be part of the process with Bloomington for you to be one of those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And again, obviously, if you'll stick around, we're going to go to public comment now, and then we will have questions, I'm sure, for you, Jeff. Thank you. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and read off several names and to let you know. First in the queue is Charlie Moore, then Jamie Matthey, then Donnie Herron. Okay, and I'll read these off as we're going through, so you can be prepared as much as possible. Come on forward, Charlie. We can expedite public comment because we're going beyond, obviously, the 15 minutes. Good evening, Charlie.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. For those of you who know me, you know I can talk fast, so I'll squeeze as much as I can in the next 3 minutes. But thank you for the opportunity to talk about downtown. As you know, with the Chamber of Commerce, we represent more than 1,000 businesses throughout McLean County. I want you to know that our board has no position on a downtown project per se. There's not been any discussion or action taken by our board. But I can tell you that there has been a project over the last 9 months, which you'll learn more about on May 18th at a special meeting in regards to the community strategy. With that, we've interviewed over 300 individuals, not just business members, but also members from throughout the community who've shared their interests in what we do for the future of Bloomington Normal. More than half of them have overwhelmingly expressed their interest on the revitalization of downtown. Not any one particular project, but the revitalization of such project. You know, as Kyle mentioned, the community's success is noted based on the success and vibrance of its downtown. We do have a market to sell. We have a message to send. And we have a downtown that we can be very proud of and an opportunity to bring life back to a downtown in which I think we all have a strong desire to see succeed. As we move forward, and we want to certainly cater to our members, but we also want to make sure we cater to the citizens and that we have an opportunity to compete for business, the talent and the workforce that the businesses need. What I mean by that is quality of place. It's not just quality of life. It's not just a particular project. It's the quality of place. Every day that we wait to make decisions on moving forward on how we want to transform our community, another community steps ahead. Another one takes that step forward, and complacency only allows us to fall behind in where we are in lining up for that potential business or that potential employee or their trailing families to come to our community. We recognize that this project can indeed be transformative. We recognize that there's a lot of opportunity, and we thank you for the hard discussions are going to take place in. We thank you for listening to all and being objective to what needs to be done as you take a look at what our downtown can provide. But we'll tell you that also while you consider not only this project that's being discussed tonight, that you keep that forward thinking of what's the next 15 to 25 years look like for downtown. We want to make sure that as we look at any developer who wants to look at investing in our downtown market, that we have the opportunity for free enterprise and the opportunity for businesses who want to invest in Bloomington to have that opportunity. We can't do that if we don't step off the dime and start making progress as to what we want to look like. But the actions you take today or the actions you take in the next coming months will be potentially transformative for where we go going forward for our businesses and for our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie. And then Jamie Matthey, then Donnie Herron, and after that, Elizabeth Gruber. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you, council folks. I'm excited to be here tonight. I'm excited to listen to this conversation. My wife, Kelly, and I have owned Kelly's Bakery and Cafe for 10 years. And we've been staring across the street for 10 years at these properties that we're talking about. And they've, Commerce Bank only moved out a few years ago, but the front and center building's been empty for the majority of that time with plywood up in the windows. And we're just so tired of looking at it. We're tired of trying to market and flag people to come down the 100 block of Center Street who walk right past it because the first thing they see if they come out of the garage and they're heading to a concert or they're heading to a sporting event, they see that corner, that massive corner with all the plywood and everything there. So I'm very excited that we're having a conversation about what's the next steps. How do we do something with this area, this quadrant of town? and how do we move it forward. It'd be good for my business. It'll be good for all of the businesses. And I think it'll be good for Bloomington as well. So I thank you very much and I hope you step up to take the time to evaluate this proposal, any proposal, to let developers know that we're open for business and we stand for something in Bloomington, and we're willing to move forward to work with people and build our future together. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, next Donnie Herron, then Elizabeth Gruber, and Tim Tilton.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I appreciate the opportunity. I had a whole litany of items that I wanted to discuss and bring to the forefront about this project and this issue, but I've changed my mind after listening to the presentation. I think some of you know my concern and my interest in downtown and growth and development downtown. And I have to say that I continue to be skeptical at the direction that the council, or I should say that the city is taking in order to pursue growth and development downtown. As a couple of you know that I've spoke with in the past, I think there's a correct way to go, and I think there's a right way to go. And I certainly empathize with Jamie and their situation and the other business owners having to deal with the downtown in its kind of a dilapidated state. However, sometimes doing something doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. So again, I think what we find here is we're putting the cart before the horse, and we're listening in our desire to have what we want so bad downtown, which I do too. I think maybe we may not be considering the full, complete picture here. Mr. Ham talked about everything that downtown should be, everything that we expect them to be. And I don't disagree with any of that. That's fantastic. Mayor Renner talked about some of the accomplishments that we've achieved over the last year or two. However, those expectations and those accomplishments, to me, in my perspective, in my opinion, don't necessarily reflect the growth that we desire and the growth that we need. And it certainly doesn't reflect the growth that we can achieve if we were to follow a different path. I think for the council to enter into a situation, a risk venture such has been presented without having more details, without having assurance that there are committed and interested parties, developers, and to commit itself to an $8 million price tag for something that we don't know what the future may hold for. I'll just be bold and step right out there and say that I'm not so sure that it doesn't border malfeasance. I think before we go any farther and spend that kind of taxpayer money, I think that probably further consideration is necessary and further than where we're at right now. And I would think that maybe it might be a good thing to put this to the vote of the people, and maybe a referendum would be a good idea for this. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Elizabeth Gruber, and then Tim Tilton, and after that, Elton Franklin.
Elizabeth Gruber, and thank you for letting me speak. I came thinking that we were going to talk about just a hotel because that's been the topic of conversation. And to be honest with you, everybody says, a hotel might be a good thing. There's only one concern that I have. When I think of a hotel, I think of a capitalist, a private enterprise doing this, somebody investing their money, risking it, and possibly losing it, possibly gaining. When I see a city council saying, I'm going to put taxpayer money forward, then I have a question, because I don't think you should be risking my tax dollars. And I have to agree with Donnie, putting up $8 million is pretty bad. And when the gentleman talked about, well, you may have to close fire stations and that, we've got one sitting there that was built that is totally vacant and was never opened. So there have been decisions that have been made with taxpayer money that have not been what I would call in your fiduciary responsibility. And Coliseum, there's like 30 million owed on it. It loses about $1 million a year. The zoo loses. The BCPA loses. The golf course, I believe, also lose. I'm sorry, I don't think you've balanced it, but if you balance that budget, I will be the first one to come here and say, go for it. If you can get that debt and those pensions, the money there for the pensions, I will be your first supporter. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Tilton, again, then Alton Franklin, and Donna Bolin.
I'll pull this down just a little bit. Mayor, council members, um, thanks for the opportunity. When we look at our future and our business personally at the Miller True Value building, which we bought nearly 20 years ago, is going into a second generation of ownership with our daughters and our son. So we're looking at a long-term view. We put a considerable amount of investment. We've moved downtown. We own the property, and we own the business, and we are an incubator for many other small businesses. We are a poster child for what you want in your downtown development. But it has to have a future. And when we look at this proposal, it's tough to see the development environment today moving forward without some involvement from the municipality. So let's look to that future. What do you want your downtown? How are you going to bring people into our community? And those are the tough questions to be answered. Is there risk? You bet. Is there an opportunity for reward? Absolutely. So take this opportunity. We're at a crossroads, and run with it. You know, do we have a particular desire for this to have happen? Yes. But there are a few things. If we can start supporting our History Museum and the Lincoln Center, the Route 66 Center, supporting the growth and vitality of existing businesses, encourage new businesses, working with IWU and many of the other folks near and around the downtown, enhance the performance of the Coliseum and BCPA. These are all things that are in a positive way and will make a great difference in our community and a very positive difference in our community. And we ask for your belief and support in looking to the future and the growth of our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Again, Alton Franklin, Donna Bolin, and then Bob Lakin.
My name is Alton Franklin. I live at 508 Patterson Drive here in Bloomington, Illinois. In a previous life, I spent a number of years as a licensed mental health counselor specializing in the field of substance abuse. One of the things that I learned then was a little anecdote. If you had a child and you lived in a house where you had a wood-burning stove in the living room and that child happened to make his way in there where that stove was and got up too close to it and burned his hands, well, you'd bandage his hands, you'd kiss it and try to make it better, and you'd move on about your way. Everything's back to the way it should. But if after doing that, that child walked into the living room, walked directly up to that wood stove, and stuck both hands on there, you'd think, you know, there might be something wrong with that child. And that's what I'm seeing here. Referendum's a great idea, Donnie. We saw what happened with the Coliseum. I'm sick and tired of being flipped off by the city council when it comes to fiscal matters. Really am. Because quite honestly, it's not that you don't pay attention. It's that you do pay attention and you don't care. Because this is what is best for you. Just shut up, sit down, and take what we give you. Or rather, give us what we take. The pocket's only so deep, folks. If I build a business in a swamp, it is not up to the surrounding community to help me drain that swamp.
It's for the others of like bent that have their businesses in that swamp as well to join with me in an effort to do it. That's what capitalism's about. That's why we're known, and I say that in the past tense, as a laissez-faire form of government. Laissez-faire, for those of you that don't speak French, that means let it alone. Let it do by itself. It does not mean setting the direction, making policy. What it means is turning to the people and going, what do you need? How can we do those services better for you? How can we make less of a financial burden on you? It's not to say, we know better than you, and we've got a glorioski picture that if you just be quiet and let us do what we need to do, while we stick our hands, oh, wait a minute, no, you're not sticking your hands on the wood stove, you're sticking ours. Come on, folks. Try to remember that you are a citizen in this community too, and try to look at it from that perspective. Thank you.
Donna Bolin, and then Hannah Alzugare, I believe.
Hi. Um, I'm all in favor of development anywhere in the city. I think it's going to be very important. And I do understand the finances and the investment issues. Having said that, given the information that was presented, I still think it's a very high gambling risk. And the reason is that you're going to have to, the way I see it, secure some kind of creative financing because the city doesn't have that $8 million. And I guess possible use of TIF or bonds, but that is taxpayer money, whether it's direct or indirect. And I keep hearing the word possible, potential, maybe, someone. And that's very speculative, which, again, that's the risk statement. And the plans to demolish the current buildings, who pays? Prepare the land, who pays? Sell to the city at $8 million. Where does that money come from? So the property will be prepackaged and gifted to a developer. And you know how I feel about that kind of stuff. The developer's not here, to my knowledge. There's no money. He doesn't have any skin in the game at this point. So all I'm asking is that you wait to vote to go forward tonight. Let all this information disseminate out into the community. Let people feed back to you. They may have insights, questions, concerns, and you were once a constituent, so keep that in mind. You probably have insights that you wanted to share with your councilman. Thank you.
We usually don't go back and forth in responding to public comment, but just to clarify, there would be no action other than to go to the next phase, to explore a possible agreement, just to clarify. That's the only thing we could possibly vote on. Okay. Hannah, and then Robert Miller. Good
Hi,
evening.
my name's Hannah Alzagari. I live on the west side. And I, like all of you, am considering the long-term future here tonight because I am just starting out. On Saturday, I'll graduate from Illinois State. And I am choosing to stay in Bloomington, unlike many of my peers who choose to take their talent and their economic impact back north. I stay here because I love this city. I really fell in love with it. And when I moved here, and I live on the west side, and I love the west side. I love to walk past the community garden. I love to walk to Jean's for ice cream. I walk to the castle to watch shows. I walk past 20-year-old lilac bushes and houses that are twice that age. I walk past kids playing football in the streets. It's idyllic. I've never had a sidewalk before, and I love it here. I also walk past the Depression. In my neighborhood, there's a house for sale on nearly every block. Our rent is higher than we can afford to make unless we work full-time on minimum wage jobs. Education is low, poverty is high, police tensions are strong here. My west side is a food desert. We don't have a grocery nearby. Then I walk past the dying cactuses in the open windows of IBC, at the corner of Front and Center. Around it, an empty lot, a coliseum, and a health department building. To the east, a downtown in need of revitalization, I do agree, and it is deserving of it. And to the west, a community just as deserving, and perhaps more so, because this community on the west is that which you should be putting your investment in as I have. This is a community that refuses to wither like the cactuses, because we have seen recent developments of efforts. This is for my neighbors and myself and my future, our quality of life. I took a chance when I invested myself in this community, believing that living here would improve my quality of life and that I could improve the quality of the community. I realize that it takes a chance to invest in the area of Front and Center, that it is dilapidated. That investment ought to maximize the city's quality as well as the city's strategic plan for moving ahead, and we ought to look at, I think, as we've said, comprehensive benefits, cohesive community involvement, something that can tie the east and the west side together. Today, I know that the word hotel is back on the winds. Today we're open-minded. My mind might be on a grocery store. East side got a Hy-Vee, and the west side deserves more than a food mart. Whatever does take the place of our beloved whole of IBC, I hope it really does reach out to the community in all directions. Maybe the EDC can look into some more opportunities there, because this is my town now. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Miller?
Thank you, Mayor and Town Council. My name is Bob Miller. I'm the chair of the McLean County Chamber of Commerce. And as chair, I'm charged with representing the interests of our chamber membership and over 1,000 businesses that are members. Core to our mission and strategy is growth and economic development and a positive business climate. Revitalization is one aspect that supports this objective. Opportunities to explore viable business development options is pivotal to avoid complacency and propel us forward to improve our economic base. This proposal will provide us with an opportunity to continue to evaluate options to make more informed decisions with our overarching vision of thoughtful business development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. And now we move to the item 6B, the council discussion on downtown redevelopment proposal. And I bet Jeff Gablehausen or maybe even Kyle, you may want to be prepared to come up and answer questions if the council has them, or even comments. So are there questions, comments by the council? All right. First of all, I see Scott Black and Maboka. Scott, we'll start with you, Alderman Black.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jeff and Kyle and everyone who spoke this evening. I'm excited that there is an interested party, a developer in our downtown. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to think about strategically, not just now, but where we want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years from now. And to me, tonight's discussion really is about the beginning, as Jeff had mentioned, a process. I think that there's going to be a lot of public dialogue that needs to be had between now and any type of final proposal. It's very easy to come up here and say, you know, it's going to cost X amount of dollars, and it could return this amount on your investment. But that requires more due diligence on our end, and I think it's critical that we take a close look at the numbers. I want to let people know, as Jamie had pointed out, that we're open for business. We want to have developers come here. We want to hear your proposals for how you're going to make our community better. We want to hear how you're going to be making investments. And to do that, we need to take our due diligence to make sure we're not putting good money after bad. We're following projects that meet with the requirements that our citizens demand of us. You know, as someone who has been on the council for 2 years, and this will be my 9th year in the community. I wasn't a part of the Coliseum conversation at all. I wasn't there for it. And to me, this is an opportunity for us to have a step forward, a way that we can, engage the public, engage developers on a long-term scale, and see what do we want this property to become. I don't know what the future looks like. I don't know if we do nothing, what is that property, what's that block going to be? It's unclear. It's probably going to continue to stagnate. It's probably nothing is going to happen. So to me, it would be irresponsible if we're not considering this proposal in its fullest. At least go through the numbers. And if our staff comes back to us and says, okay, these numbers aren't adding up in the way that we need them to, as a council, we can have that discussion. But to me, this is the first step in a very exciting process that I want to hear what people have to say. I want to hear what ideas are. And I can just tell you that, as the alderman for just north of the downtown area, people ask me all the time, why doesn't the city just put this in there, a grocery store I hear frequently, or a youth center, or something that we can do. And the challenge is budgetary. I mean, we don't have the money to just put in whatever we want. And we want to make sure that we're making smart, responsible fiscal choices for today and the future, because I want to see our community be successful. A lot of times you think about governments and where's this community going to be? State Farm has moved some jobs up, but they've invested heavily in our education system. You see our unemployment being some of the lowest in downstate. I believe it is the lowest in downstate Illinois. We're capitalizing on being on 39, on 55, and 74. We have a powerful airport that's doing some wonderful business and growing. We are right there at the precipice of becoming just this wonderful area, and we can invest properly. We can see that developed and nurtured down the road, and that's what I find exciting to me. And I'm excited to see what the staff will have to say about these numbers and what it holds for our future. So thanks for everybody, and I hope we can keep it open mind as we go through the process. Thank you.
Then I have Alderman Milwambwe, and then Howman and Schmidt.
Okay, thank you. And speaking of process, David, I'd like to know what process will the staff go through and what steps are they going to take in terms of evaluating this? What is that going to involve? What are the timelines we are looking at?
Well, first off, it's going to take considerable time and effort. As we are up against a timeline, so staff definitely, to really do our due diligence, will have to put aside many other priorities and other work in order to focus on this. Certainly, I can see a couple of more meetings with the council, maybe first to come back and report to council on some of our initial findings, initial analysis, make sure that the council feels that based on preliminary information, you want us to continue on to probably the final stage, which is actually preparing a formal written agreement for council consideration. I don't, let me make sure I underscore, there is going to be a lot of time and effort, because what you do, you have a situation here where there is a lot of unknowns. And if you thought the paradigm, agreement was something that was complex, this could also, because what we have to do is consider a lot of the what ifs and the contingency plans, because ultimately what we would be purchasing is a shovel-ready site, things like that. But there is, as an example, some of the things we'll be looking at is asking for a lot of detail from Mr. Gablehausen, detail behind each and every element of the supposed purchase price. As the purchase price continues to change and modify, we'll have to look at that. We've also need to look at, all the estimates for demolition and what that could include. What about relocation? Can that all be accomplished within certain timetables? Any kind of agreement would have to have a timeline. It would have to have performance standards. It would have to ensure that this council would say, okay, if this agreement is entered into, here's what the council, the community could expect, and this is what would happen if the developer failed to perform and to complete anything and any steps along that nature. We'd also want to look at what are some of the potential developments on the site, because once you make the investment and purchase the property, we do not know at this point in time who the individuals would be to submit proposals, what kind of development they would propose, and then even more so, what could be some of the revenue generated from those projects, which is an unknown. Typically, a lower risk would be if you knew exactly what's going to be built there and you could do your financial analysis of the revenue to be generated. We don't have that in this particular kind of scenario. Uh, those, we'd also have to come back to you with some alternatives on raising the fund, borrowing the money to purchase this. We do not have, the financial wherewithal to utilize just existing cash without seriously impacting some of the policies the council's had. We also want to make sure that we look at the historical issues. So unfortunately, all this analysis, fact-finding, working with Mr. Gablehausen, fact-checking, and utilizing other outside experts to review some of the same material is something that would have to be done in a very short period of time. I wish we had more time, but Mr. Gablehausen does have some particular parameters and some deadlines he has to meet. So all this would have to very much be done in the next 4 to 5 weeks. Can I just say too, it will take a little of additional financial resources as well. We do not have the full capability to look at certain aspects. So we would probably be asking for anywhere from, our estimate right now early on is around $25,000 or more for some of the specialists and experts we would want to assist us in this evaluation.
Next in line is Alderwoman Howman and then Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Jeff and Kyle and to the people who spoke at public comment. We need to be open to ideas to revitalize downtown, and I'm excited that we've at least begun this discussion tonight. As a newer member, no longer the newest member of the City Council, I'm still building my institutional knowledge on this topic. And so I do have some specific questions that won't be answered tonight, but that I do want to get on the table as we go down the road. If this project begins with the block that Mr. Gabrielhausen has selected, that's great. If through the process another idea emerges, that's great too. Since less than 10% of our citizens voted in the last election, I'm not in favor of a referendum to the citizens. I mean, we're still not going to get what we need. What I'd rather see are some discussions held throughout the city where questions can be asked and answered in a more informal basis. Thank you.
Alderwoman Schmidt.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Gablehausen for your creativity and energy around this. I really appreciate that. And I particularly appreciate you reaching out to Greg Coos on the historical aspects of this project. It's very much appreciated. I did have a question about you outlined in general the proposal that would make this shovel ready. Can you talk just a little bit about how much of that is negotiable, and might we come back to you with other what if we took this away, or what if we added that?
Absolutely. The scope is kind of a combination being defined by Farnsworth Group that's assisting me with this process. Stark, which has been involved in providing estimates on the demolition, and then they're shepherding the abatement. So it's all open book. I mean, I'll say a little bit a la carte-ish. So if we looked and said, we really don't want that to occur. I'm making up an extreme example, but let's say that you really want the Elks Lodge to stay because you want to keep that building for some reason. Then we can look at that as a separate, carve out as to why it wants to stay.
And is it also a la carte in terms of the kind of the specific work aspects of it? Like suppose we didn't go totally to shovel ready, for example.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, certainly sit down with Mr. Hales and the staff and say, what level do you want it, do you want it taken to?
Okay, I appreciate
yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just as a follow-up to that, if the People's Bank didn't come down, then we would save money on demolition. But then there would be more money then for rehabilitation?
Well, I don't want to say that because it depends, going back to Alderwoman Schmidt, how much shovel-ready do we make that building? Meaning the shell can stay and it can still be shovel-ready by an internal demolition. In some ways, we're concerned that may actually add cost, but we simply don't know. I mean, we're too early in that understanding, Mayor.
Let's see.
I'm not done yet. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Oh, I apologize.
I'm
Oops.
almost
Are you done with
Oh,
me?
I'm sorry.
Well, I will finish off though by saying I really appreciate you bringing up the but-for economic strategy because we do in fact have an economic policy on this council that guides us in these conversations, and I think that will continue to be a good guideline for us. And I believe that you commented that our motion might be to ask city staff to exercise our due diligence and really determine if the project's a good fit for Bloomington. Is that correct?
I believe that was the intention
Right.
for this evening. Right.
And as Scott and others have said, I'm really interested in hearing what additional feedback we're going to get over the next few years. I was around for the U.S. Cellular Coliseum conversation, and this feels like an opportunity to maybe do it right, and I'm interested in this. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Sage.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to echo what a couple of other aldermen have already said. I want to say thanks to Mr. Ham and Mr. Gablehausen. And also to you, Mayor. I think I've said publicly at council meetings, I've said privately, I appreciate the cheerleading and the positive approach you bring to downtown. That's been a welcome change. So thank you. Economic development, it is important to our city, and like other discussions when we have about this, I feel like I always have to say that for me, this is not about making a value judgment. This is a good project. This is a bad project. It's about working through the process of is it a priority right now? David, you alluded to perhaps this idea of floating a bond to do this. And so I'm going to ask you, and then Jeff, I'm going to ask you to come back up. So we have this $8.2 million number out there. How do we foresee, what I'm trying to understand, and specifically what I know folks in my ward are interested in, is what dollar amount will the taxpayers be on the hook for should this go forward? And what does that, what makes up that 8.2 million? Is it basically the city floating a bond to cover that amount? Is it then, is there some other combination of a TIF district? What is the combination that gets us to the 8.2 million? Do we know that right now? Do we have any idea what gets us to that number right now?
First, let me split it into two parts, because certainly before we see any development take place there, the city would have to borrow funds in order to pay the $8 million, in part to help ensure that we can then purchase the property in a shovel-ready state. The second part is then when the RFP is issued and if there's development proposals come in, then we can better identify, okay, what would be that new investment and what would that investment generate in the way of new revenue, which could then be used to pay off the debt service of any funds be used. So, it's kind of this two-step process. And up front, the only thing's definite is that we'd have to borrow those funds, but then when we complete the second phase, we'd have a better idea to share with you what the potential is for project revenue to go and pay off our initial investment, the $8 million, as well as we still don't know in the second phase, could a developer also ask for additional incentives? That's always a possibility as we see how competitive. So those are, some real unknowns in the second phase.
Okay. So Jeff, if you could come back up and just talk a little bit about let me ask you perhaps a preliminary question, because I heard a little wrinkle in some comments here, and that was, a lot of times we talk about economic projects or forecast projections in terms of kind of a level of confidence, 80% confident, 90%. What level of confidence do you have around that $8.2 million number?
In terms of the accuracy of that number?
The accuracy of that.
I would say with the one caveat being the what I'll call the hand demolition inside the Commerce Building, and that's something we haven't fully explored. if the building came down its entirety, we felt pretty good, like we were real close on that 8.2. We need to go back and evaluate if, what is the alternative in terms of, more hand demolition. And so, but that being said, Alderman, and something that Mr. Hales and I have talked about, the 8.2 million, I mean, one of the things that we had assumed what would happen is that would initially be a local borrowing. I wouldn't use the term borrow or bond. I would say it'd be a straight borrowing. We have talked to a couple of the local banks just to get an understanding of what type of rate that is, how easy that is to borrow. I'm not going to quote any specific bankers, but they certainly sound like it would be a very simple borrowing at an interest rate of probably in the neighborhood of 1 to 1.1%.
Okay.
So the cost to hold that is probably, in the $80,000-$90,000 if it were to last a year in that short term. I agree entirely with Mr. Hales that ultimately, depending upon what happens in the RFPs, um, some or all of that number may go into a more long-term bond, knowing full well those revenue streams that are specifically coming in to pay that. Those revenue streams being property taxes, sales taxes, or others.
If I could follow up on just that,
I don't know if I answered
turn right back to you. So just to clarify, would it be possible for us to structure this such that the bond doesn't come due until the project is done? And then the TIF pays for the money and not the general fund?
Yeah, I mean, it's, and I don't want to speak for your staff, your finance staff, but clearly this can be done without impacting the operating budget. And most municipalities that are doing these deals, that's exactly how they would structure it, not to impact the operating budget.
Okay, so I'm going to then I want to follow up on something you just said. I thought I heard you say the phrase knowing full well the revenue streams going forward. Yet what I just heard our city manager say is we can't know full well what the revenue streams are going forward.
And Alderman, you and I haven't had an opportunity to meet, but one of the things that we have produced that we've shared with staff, and we'd share in a lot more detail, are some hypothetical developments, things that that we have knowledge of that could be proposed, or and looking at the most non-aggressive of those developments. I think it's reasonable to look at what types of revenues they could produce, either in a mixed-use development or other developments. And I think that the numbers are clearly evident that they can more than satisfy the costs associated with the purchase. So not, I can't say an exact project, but I can give you hypothetical examples that are clearly there.
So again, a couple of other questions. So the 8.2 million was based on a scope of work that envisioned the demolition of the Commerce Building. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So again, I'm not an expert in demolition, but I have to assume if we're trying to keep the building standing up while we're demolishing the interior, the costs that are going to go up.
I don't want to. I really don't want to speak for the contractor because we haven't looked at it.
What does your gut tell you about costs?
My gut tells me that there's more handwork, but there's less disposal costs. There's less, heavy equipment, more labor. So it's not that large of a building. It's about 44,000 square feet. So I really don't want to suggest, because I really don't know. I said during my comments that I try to surround myself with people smarter than me. There's people a lot smarter than me on that subject, and I'd like the opportunity to talk to them.
Okay.
And during this process, we would have that opportunity.
One of the other aspects of this is we take and we in some manner convert this back to a greenfield space, if you will, or at least that's the vision. There's obviously a lot of infrastructure and aged infrastructure in that area. How far out have you considered the infrastructure needs that will have to be made whole as part of this greenfield conversion? I mean, geographically out from the property itself.
Well, we've not asked for a study of off-site surrounding infrastructure. That being said, we've been offered some opinions from the folks at Farnsworth, and I'm led to believe that however this were ultimately developed, the infrastructure is going to be fine. But again, you would need to know that before you ever do any type of redevelopment of the property. I mean, if if the water line has to be upgraded, if the sewer line has to be upgraded, I simply am not able to answer that question today.
And here's why I asked that, because one of the mistakes made by the former city manager and those involved in the Coliseum decision involved misunderstanding what the infrastructure costs were surrounding the property around the Coliseum. And at some point, after construction started, the city had to go back in and was on the hook for, I think, something approaching perhaps $500,000 of infrastructure upgrades. And so I make that point. I make that point with the revenue projections. I make that point with the scope of the work. Initially, the scope's on the demolition of the Commerce Bank. Now we're talking about the remodeling of that building. So to say that this is fluid is a generous statement, right? At least for me.
It's definitely fluid for the next several weeks. No doubt about it. I mean, um, we recognize that there's decisions that need to be made. We're fine tuning them. One of the reasons that that we're meeting tonight is to determine whether or not it's worth our time, quite frankly, to continue, going down this process.
Okay. And you mentioned here in the next couple of weeks, and David, I know you alluded to that too. In terms of a time box here, that's a time box that's self-imposed by Jeff, right? That's not something that this council or this staff has imposed. And so my comment is, we have to make sure that we absolutely have the time to do this in a very professional and diligent, credible manner based on some of the dollars that are being asked for here. And so from a timing perspective, I really, when I say I couldn't care less about meeting some deadline for the developer or the project manager here, I mean, I really couldn't care less. That we have to make sure that we have all the time that we need to look at things like, the return on investment, and financing, and all of those other, as well as some of the engineering stuff. Again, that surrounding infrastructure is a real point of concern for me.
And I think it'd just be helpful for Jeff to kind of indicate again what that timeline is, because I know this offer or this opportunity isn't, something that we can give months of consideration for. Do you want to kind of touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, I fully respect that there has to be time to get the information, and we're not going to set an arbitrary deadline. I'm dealing with property sellers, so to the extent I can get cooperation from them that gives more time, then we'll certainly seek that. So that's the driving force. It's not a vacation schedule I have. We're dealing with the property owners, and I think if they see that we're making progress and that it's moving along positively, I'd hope that if we needed a little more time, we could get it.
Okay. Mayor, those were some specific questions. If possible, as maybe we move into more of a true council discussion, maybe have the opportunity to talk again, I would appreciate it.
I think that was my understanding.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
So we have Alderman Lauer, Painter, and Howman in that order.
Well, stepping back and looking at this from a big picture, I appreciate the time issue because this is a huge decision, especially when we're under the auspice of not really having the capital to even be discussing this. Even on the short term and moving into the long term, going out several decades. It's been pointed out in volumes that we have between $400 and $600 million worth of delinquent investment that we need to make in our city infrastructure itself, streets, sewers, and it goes on from there. I'm not sure that we really should be entertaining this at all, to be honest with you, from that perspective. I certainly appreciate the time issue. I don't think that anyone, including any of our constituents, want to rush into anything. I'm not hearing that from anyone, even on the street. I have a lot of questions. I have a number of folks that have questions about and involving Mr. Geibelhausen and the current property ownership, whether they're even willing to sell. Those are huge questions. How vested you are in the properties yourself. It appears to me that you're probably charging a bit of a premium here. We haven't even discussed this with any other demolition companies. We have several here locally, as I understand it, that might even employ Mr. Stark. there's just a there's a very very wide variation of issues that we're all trying to cram together in a very short period of time, and I don't think that's um, I don't think it's the proper thing to start with. Uh, Risk and supposition is the part of private investment, and that risk is what they get paid back for. Um, that's not something that the city of Bloomington should be involved in. We should divest ourselves of the risk and try to um, engage developers uh, to come in and make uh, a profit here and encourage that. I am currently and have been talking to a number of developers in a number of areas, even just in Ward 1, that would probably be in competition with this venture at some point in time. It isn't the proper time because of the economy and the current aspects of our state government and the many unknowns that are happening uh, with the changes that they're about to make. Uh, and so I don't know how you define anything, even with a huge study. I'm not sure that we could define it until we know what the state government is actually going to do. Uh, and then we have a number of major businesses that affect Bloomington as well as the surrounding communities that will have to re-engage and look at where they're going into the future. And all of these things are in play. This is a big puzzle, and we have to deal with that. Um, I, there's just a number of questions that would have to be fully answered and fully investigated before we would really even consider this, even in terms of a private investment. Sure, we'd love to have a lot of things. A lot of folks would like to go to the circus every day, but it's not realistic. I'm not sure this is the realistic time for this particular investment, and I'm sure that we have many, many other priorities that need to be met prior to even looking at this. Uh, One of the things that I have on my plate is completing uh, an infrastructure issue on the south side, and that would be the Bun to Hamilton extension. If we did that, even if we bonded for it, yes, it probably would pay off the bonds eventually, and it would service our major employer, and it would affect many, many folks that travel that area every day. It would make things safer, it would make things more economical, and everything in that area would further develop. And so there's a number of exponentials that would happen. Everything that we do affects everything else in town. We need to be aware of that. So why the concentration on downtown? I'm not really sure. Sure, I would love to see a lot of things, but we did have a study recently that told us that having a hotel in the vicinity of the Coliseum will not positively affect that Coliseum. The gentleman stood right here and told us that. So we need to take that off the plate. We need to consider the fact that that's probably not the reason to have this development push forward with this. Uh, and again, there's many, many other considerations. I'd certainly love to see a flourishing downtown, but we have to understand that it is not the major profit or funding generator, tax generator for our community. It hasn't been in 40 years. And quite frankly, my grandfather dealt with that with this particular property. And that was back in the 1950s. We've been dealing with it ever since. This is nothing new. I've said that before. Uh, there's a lot of things we'd like to do. Uh, Again, I'm quite sure that we have priorities that don't involve this particular venture with that kind of money. Thank you.
Alderwoman, say Painter, and then Howman and Black. All right?
Yeah. First off, thank you, Mr. Gablehausen and Mr. Ham, for your presentation, and thanks to all the other council members who've weighed in. Um, it's clear to me that the only way that we're going to dig ourselves out of this financial hole that we've been presented with without raising taxes sky high is to nurture business development. Um, we don't have the details about all of this. I've got questions as well, but I'm game for going forward and finding out more about this. I think that it's possible that this could be a good deal. I don't know. I'm anxious to get started down the path of discovering all the details. Thanks.
Okay. Then we'll go to Alderwoman Howman and Black as redirect.
Thanks. I just had one quick question. How important is the property being shovel-ready?
It's critical. As I mentioned in my comments, developers have a lot of things that we all look at. And I think one of the critical things is the the return on our time, the return on the opportunity, and you know, the developers that I'm talking to that have the wherewithal to do this, other developers that I'm aware of that might have an interest, they need to know the site's ready. The market's today for them. It's not something that might happen 12 months or 24 months from now.
And I just wanted to echo what Johnny was saying, that if this helps to build our tax base, then I think it's something we need to look at. I'm not saying I'm voting for it tonight, just that, or approve, anyway, I think it's an opportunity we need to investigate. Thank you.
Alderman Black.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to thank the other aldermen for weighing in and raising a lot of questions. And to me, tonight is the beginning of a lot of questions. And I think this is an opportunity for us to ask those questions in a more formalized way and have our staff come back to us with answers to those questions. And if they're unable to, then we take that with a grain of salt and we consider it as part of our overall decision with the potential proposal. I understand that there's a lot of resources that are going to be required for this. Personally, I think that we're at a crossroads. If we don't do this, what happens? How much longer until the next opportunity comes around? And I hear people all the time talk about, well, the economy's got to get better. Somebody's going to be coming in here. Where's it been? This is the first time we've had a very serious discussion, at least one we've had to call a special meeting to talk about a very major project. If I had the money, I would do it, but I don't. But we are in a position where we can have a conversation as a community where we can say, hey, we want to see our downtown do well. We want to see businesses do well. If this, I wonder if, we talked about the airport, we had FedEx come, we talked about other economic opportunities, R.R. Dudley comes around. That didn't generate this amount of controversy in comparison to this downtown project. And I wonder if that has to do with some of the lingering emotional feelings. So to me, this should be a fact-based discussion, and we got to get the facts on the table. We're all speaking at this point in time in hypotheticals. Well, if this happens, then that has to happen. If we don't see this revenue stream, then we're not going to be able to do the project. That's not as fact-driven as I'd like it to be, and we can empower the staff to come back to us with those facts, and as a council, we can make a determination as to whether or not this is the type of risk we want to be taking. And I think that if we go and take this step forward and say, okay, staff, work on this project, vet it, we can all give our questions to them to have answered. The public can weigh in through us or directly to us through email, and they can come back to us, and then we can have Jeff come back and Kyle come back or whoever to tell us about, okay, these are the questions that we had, and here are the answers. And then we make the determination at that time. But to me, I would hate to end this process just because we have some uncertainty. I know that, but we don't have all the facts on the table. And the consultant that came about the hotel feasibility study, I was very disappointed that when they came back, it didn't include the impact from the Route 66 Visitor Center. I mean, already you've seen people down there, and it's bustling. It's a new approach, a new look. There's a lot of energy in the air, and that's more of that feeling, but we don't have the facts. I want to see some of these facts. What are the true numbers of the people that are going to be coming down there? What is the ultimate economic impact? And these are things that we need to empower the staff to do. So to me, this is time well spent, questions well asked, and we can come back and determine at a later point if this fits our needs. Thank you.
I do have Alderman Fruin there, but is that, since we're I'm looking at time and I see a couple more people might want to speak, is that a motion? This wouldn't end discussion, but as a motion under 6C to ask the staff to continue to proceed on working out toward an agreement?
Absolutely, it's a motion.
Okay. Is there a second for that?
I'll second that.
A second by Alderman Schmidt. And then Alderman Fruin and Sage.
Thank you, Mayor. Rather than repeat what's been said, I am encouraged by the opportunity we have tonight, and we've talked about downtown a lot. The thing I'd like to just mention tonight is that tonight is one topic, and as has been referred to by others, as David mentioned, as he does additional staff work, things that he's got on his plate now might have to be pushed back. I just want to make sure that as we explore this, that we look at everything else that we have on our plate, and I think we need to decide if other things are going to be pushed back, what are they? I'm not going to give examples tonight. We know what they all are, but we need to make sure that we're looking at the bigger picture and not just a single isolated opportunity. The other thing I'll mention real quickly is, with all respect to the History Museum and Mr. Coos and all the good work he's done, I'll be very curious as to how the Commerce Bank building fits into this picture. It kind of reminds me of other projects we've seen either in town or in other communities where development occurs around a entity that would not participate in the development. The things that come to my mind are the development of Prairie Vista Golf Course, where we had a residence that did not commit to the city, and the same thing happened out at the Den, where we had a property owner that did not commit to the bigger package. I know that happens in the urban setting too, where somebody won't play. I don't know whether the Commerce Bank fits in this package or not, either as it exists or as a demolish, but we need to be cautious about, I know if I asked Greg the difference between historic and old, he would tell me this is historic, but I think we need to make sure we understand that too. So thank you very much.
Just to clarify, I think if there's any confusion, and Mr. Gablehausen, you can clarify. At this point, the thing that is difficult, as Alderman Fruin has suggested, and I think there were a couple of questions, is in downtowns, is making sure that you have options on the property. So at this point, you're not blowing smoke. You have options on these properties.
Yes, absolutely.
Just to clarify, and that's the timetable that
Yes.
your response
Yes.
to Alderman Sage.
And the Commerce Bank building would be part of the process. The question becomes ultimately, is the reuse of that building. It's not that, in those examples, it sounded like the private owner didn't participate in the overall development. Either way, that property's incorporated into the overall development.
Alderman Sage.
Thank you, Mayor. And Scott, I appreciate the point you made. I mean, it's right. We don't have all the facts. But so I guess the question I'm considering right now is just from purely a philosophical perspective, and that is at some point, whether we say we're going to bond this, or I heard the phrase local borrowing. I mean, there's any number of comforting phrases I'm sure that we can use in that conversation. But so part of the question, the conversation I'm having with myself right now is that at some point, are we going to be prepared to ask the taxpayers of Bloomington to be on the hook for some amount of money, whether it's less than 8.2 or 8.2 or more than 8.2, on the promise of future revenue? Because we'll still only be having forecasts and estimates and so forth. And we may have, fairly high level of confidence in that, but sooner or later, to fast forward to some point here, after staff comes back, if it sounds like a majority of the council is going to be in favor of that, if staff comes back, then are we prepared right now philosophically, do we have our mind around saying we will put the taxpayers on the hook for some seven-figure amount, and then anticipate future revenues to help pay back and cover that cost? That's a model that's been tried downtown before. It hasn't quite panned out that way. So again, that's part of the conversation I'm having with myself.
By on the hook, I guess, what do you mean by on the hook?
I mean, if we float a bond for $8 million, somebody's going to want that paid back.
Well, I mean, again, my understanding was, my question to Mr. Gablehausen was, again, we haven't worked out the details. We don't know what the project might be, but a project on that site, whatever, say the property goes from being worth $3 million to $33 million, the increment of that property tax can pay back the increase, can pay back the bond, and or maybe hotel motel tax. Again, stuff that we're not getting. The but for point was, but for the investment, we wouldn't get that revenue that would be earmarked to pay the bond.
But and I understand,
It could be.
and it's a good point, but it's still future revenue versus a current today's expense that the taxpayers would be asked to make up front.
Well, you could have the bond payments begin at the time that the project's completed.
And I know there are a lot of specifics.
But it is future. It's all future.
And I don't know still as I sit here for sure what form the public money is going to take. Is it going to be a TIF, or is the city going to float a bond? is where we're going to go into, Commerce Bank and ask for a loan. Those are more hows, right? But the what is that we will ask the taxpayers up front to be on the hook for seven figures in anticipation of future new revenues. And so back to my original point, Scott's right. We don't have all the answers yet. We don't have all the details. But philosophically, we know we have one reality. That's what we're going to probably have to do. So again, appreciate your comments, Scott. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah. Thank you. Alderwoman Burgess.
Thank you. From my perspective, there are two things that really matter when we have this conversation. One is perspective, and the other is the language we use. And I think it's best to look at this from the perspective of why the taxpayer and why the citizens of the community should be involved in this conversation at this point in time. Why that is preferable to just saying to the developers and the investment in the private business to do your own thing. And that is because we get to have a say. If a private developer comes in here and purchases these properties, they can tear them down and do whatever they want. We have a wonderful opportunity right now to be part of the conversation for a while longer and to find out more information. And I think that's incredibly valuable. I mean, already look at it. We've heard that originally the Commerce Bank building, the former People's Bank building, the initial thought was to tear it down. And then it was pointed out that this building is important to some of the people in this community, and that it is a contributing structure on the National Historic Registry, that it was built by Arthur Pillsbury, and is an excellent example of the work that he did in our community, and that has value to us as a community. It may not have direct economic value to a business, but it has value to the community and to the perspective that, and the face that we offer to the people visiting our city and the people who live here and the people who work here. So I think that's one reason why I'm very excited that we are part of this conversation, and that it is worthwhile to continue to be part of the conversation and to make sure that however this property is used, an entire city block in downtown Bloomington reflects our values as a community, and not only is an asset to the community in terms of quality of life, but that is returning a direct economic benefit to us and enriching us in every way that it can. That's all I have.
Okay. If there aren't any more comments, the vote, again, this is just a vote. Yes would mean to continue with the staff work toward coming up toward an agreement, toward a proposal, beginning to work out some of the details. It very likely would involve at least a couple more city council meetings, which certainly might involve more mayoral open houses. Just to clarify and put a plug in for my mayoral open house, I bet it'll be well packed on Friday. It's every Friday before a Monday city council meeting. So 4:30 to 5:30, you can sit around the table, come on by, and talk about this. There'll be at least 2, 3 of those at the earliest before we would make a decision, and we may need more time. And that's part of what Mr. Gablehausen can find out. The thing that's driving it is just the options, as I understand it, that you have on these pieces of property are time sensitive. Okay. All right. So again, let me. All right. There we go. An aye, again, is in favor of this, moving forward, not through the proposal, and a nay would be against. Not everybody. Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. The motion passes 8-1. Madam Clerk, would you announce the nays?
Alderman Lauer.
Okay. Thank you very much. And at this point, given that this is a special meeting, we don't have city manager or mayoral comments. You're spared my diatribes. And at this point, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Schmidt, second by Alderman Black. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? We're adjourned.